I'll turn it over to you, Banjo. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 CACOS Academic Advising Summit. Whether you're an academic advisor, an advising manager, or simply someone passionate about the field of advising, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here. My name is Banjo Laleye, and I have the pleasure of serving as one of the 3 co-chairs for the Academic Advising Committee of Practice. Before we dive into today's agenda, I want to begin with the land acknowledgement. While I know you are joining from many different places across Canada, I am joining you today from Northlands College in La Ronge, which is in northern Saskatchewan. As we gather here today, I acknowledge the Northlands College operates on Treaties 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories and the homeland of the Métis. I pay respect to the First Nation and Métis and ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. At this time, I encourage each of you to take a moment to reflect on and acknowledge the traditional territories from which you're joining us today. Please know that today's session is being recorded. I want to take a quick moment to recognize my fantastic co-chairs, Sona Ray and Pearl Mendoza, who have been integral to our community's work. I also want to thank our regional liaisons and volunteers who have been involved in the planning of this event. Your dedication has been invaluable. An event of this scale takes a village to put together. So I want to give a massive shout out to Sultan, the coordinator of professional development and learning for CACOS. Sultan has been highly instrumental in ensuring this summit is well organized and successful. I also want to extend our deepest gratitude to Jennifer Hamilton, who is the Executive Director of CACOS. Jennifer has been incredibly supportive as well. I also want to extend our deepest gratitude to all the presenters who will be sharing their research, showcases, and knowledge exchange with us over the next few days. We have colleagues joining us from across Canada and from the US as well, and we're honored by their contributions. And to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy schedule to register and attend this summit, we say thank you very much, and thank you for joining. Across Canada, institutions in almost every province are facing unprecedented challenges. Many of our members have been directly affected by the significant enrollment declines following changes to international student immigration policies and compounded by reduced institutional funding. At the same time, advising offices and advisors are being asked, expected really, to do more with fewer resources. We have witnessed rounds of layoffs across the country, and the strain on our profession is very real. In this moment of challenge, there are still possibilities to unlock, and we've gathered together to learn from one another, to share strategies for sustainability, and to find ways to support our students and ourselves amid these shifting circumstances. So over the next few days, I encourage you to attend as many of these sessions as you can. Our panelists and moderator have been carefully selected from across Canada. They represent decades of combined experience across a wide variety of regions, academic disciplines, and institutions. Our flow for day 1 kicks off with our featured panel, which is titled Unlocking Possibilities Advising in a Shifting Landscape. After the panel, we will have a live Q&A. We'll take a short break and then end into a separate Zoom room for a networking session. On behalf of CACOS and the Academic Advising Committee of Practice, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our panelists, Tim Fricker, Tyler Hall, Renee Penney, and Dimple Rai. I'm now going to hand the floor over to Marion. Marion is from the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, who will be our moderator for today. And I will invite her to moderate our panel discussion and introduce herself and our guest as well. Thank you. Marion.
Thanks so much, Banjo. That was such a kind introduction, and you've really set the stage for our conversation today. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel discussion. My name is Marion Mildenberger, and I am a team lead for academic advising at SAIT, which is in Calgary, Alberta. And I'll turn it over to Tim next.
Hi, everybody. Tim Fricker, Dean of Student Experience and Wellbeing at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. Great to be with you today.
Tyler?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Hall. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Resident and Student Affairs at the Faculty of Medicine in Dalhousie University. So different context coming from the School of Medicine. It's a little bit different than my undergraduate advising, but before that, I was in Arts and Science as well at Dalhousie. So I've been in learner affairs for almost 20 years, all at Dalhousie University. So excited to be here.
Great, thanks. Renee?
Hello, everyone. I'm Renee Penney. I was formerly, up until last week, Student Services Strategist at SAS Polytech. And prior to that, I was Director of Student Advising and Academic Services in the College of Arts and Science at the University of Saskatchewan. I've also conducted research around the experiences of equity-deserving students when seeking support. So I'm bringing all that knowledge and experience to share with you today. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Renee. And finally, Dimple.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. My name is Dimple Rai. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director for Advising and Career Services at Humber Polytechnic, which is based in the Toronto area. Our model is unique because we do a blend of academic and career advising, and our advisors are also career and student success advisors. So my perspective will be slightly different in terms of that focus and our Polytechnic mandate here at Humber.
All right, thanks everyone. So yeah, just to speak again to the conversation we're going to have today, as Banjo mentioned, the higher education sector in Canada just is continuing to shift, and academic advising remains a cornerstone of sustainable student and institutional success. As our field transforms, advisors are navigating new challenges, emerging opportunities, and increased expectations for student-centered, equity-driven support. So today our conversation will focus on how advisors can contribute to building resilient, future-ready institutions while navigating our complex and always changing Canadian post-secondary landscape. So as a first question to get us going, not only is our environment complex right now, but as we all know, our students are always complex. They come with their own set of challenges and needs. And advisors often learn the full complexity of our students' lives through our conversations, and we might be the primary support during their challenging moments. So we'll do this in a bit of a round robin. I will call someone out to get us started though, because we are online. And the question is, how have students' needs or levels of complexity changed in recent years from your perspective? And I'm going to start with Renee.
I knew you were going to start with me. I think one of the biggest challenges we've seen, and you've touched on it already, is that there's been an increased need or an increased demand. So the volume of student inquiries has increased while the capacity to respond to those needs has not. And in some cases, it's actually decreased. And another layer to that cake is that the complexity of student needs has increased substantially. We saw this bloom even more during the pandemic, and yet the skill set or the competencies, if you will, that advisors possess is not necessarily aligned with student needs. So we've got that volume and complexity and a need to review the skill set of advisors in order to find that balance again.
Yeah, it's like just competing priorities, right? Do we manage the volume of students or do we manage the lower capacity? Tyler, what's your experience been like?
Yeah, it's definitely a shifting sands, and I think there's a lot of factors impacting that. But I think the two that, especially in medicine, we're coming across, because medical training is a very Eurocentric colonial institution. Like the way we're trained is very, it's very rigid. There's not a lot of room for inclusion despite the many different committees that there are. And so what we're finding is we're opening our pathways, and we have an admissions pathway specifically for Black learners, specifically for Indigenous learners, and it's great that they're getting access to this. But when they enter the system, the supports are not there. And so I think the complexity of those learners and the very much needed representation, identities, and experience that they bring are not being properly accommodated from the system in general. The other thing too that we're noticing is more increased complexities around learner accommodations. And so, the first half of med school, we have extra time on exams and we have, the kind of general cue sheets. But then when we get into medical training, when they're working with patients, we have folks with sensory challenges, and so they can't take a pulse the same way. We have folks in wheelchairs, and so the hospitals are not, despite being hospitals, are not always designed for that. And so I think complexity is increasing more and more, and I think these large institutions are having a hard time keeping up. And so I think our roles are so important because we're the ones that need to help advocate for change. But it's rough out there. And I think given our current political climate, I think some folks are having a harder time than others. Luckily, we have a really great dean right now of medicine and a president who support these initiatives. But I know a lot of folks out there, including, our friends in the States. I have a couple people. I teach a course in the US and I'm not allowed to do land acknowledgements. And so we're all facing very different issues. And those identities that are coming in are not changing, but the way we're supporting them becomes much and much more complex. So yeah, it's shifting sands is definitely happening.
Yeah, and yeah, it's nice to hear that, not nice to hear, that's not a great word. It's good to know that this is a consistent challenge, right? I know I can say the same thing. It's SAIT. I work in a school of health as well. We just got a report this morning actually about the students and the challenges that our faculty are seeing in the classroom and translating that into a practicum setting. So the needs of the students are there and complex and educating them while also helping them navigate through the system and taking into consideration all of the different needs can be a big challenge for sure. Yeah. How about you, Dimple? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's a yes and kind of response because the increase in complex cases and it's the external barriers I think that we're seeing a lot of that's impacting students' ability to be successful. So the number of students we're seeing now with food insecurity, housing insecurity, increased financial need, mental health concerns on top of the accommodation requirements that Tyler's already mentioned. I think that's definitely an increase we've seen. Something I was thinking about, though, that I was reflecting on is that I don't think we realize that we're kind of out of that blip now of where we were in this weird hybrid state of transitioning out of COVID and back into primarily in-person learning. And we're only just seeing, like, it depends. I mean, Humber, we have a range of types of credentials from, 1-year certificates to 4-year degrees, but we're really now only just seeing the students who started in the pandemic and were in high school in the pandemic that are now close to or have just completed their studies. And we're still living in a highly hybrid environment. But the impact of COVID on those students, their learning style, their learning needs, their attention span, their ability to transfer in between hybrid and in-person environments, how to participate, we're only just seeing those students now graduate or become close to completion. And so, we've also seen with some of the issues in terms of enrollment, we've seen changes in entry GPAs at our institution. And so the levels of literacy and numeracy that learners are coming in with and some programs, I think is also a huge, I don't want to call it an issue, but it's a huge portion of the types of supports and the navigation that our advisors are required to do for these learners and connecting them to the right resources. I think the complexity of learners' needs in terms of the skill sets they're coming in with has changed drastically. And that has really required us to think differently about the advisor's role as navigators and upskilling them, not with certifications and training in other areas, but really understanding how even the services at our institution have changed and helping students navigate other services on campus more effectively to be able to have that holistic conversation, to be able to really adjust that developmental advising approach to be able to meet all of those complex needs and not have all the answers, of course, right? We're still making those warm referrals. We're not stepping on the toes of our colleagues, but having the capacity to be able to have some of those conversations, I think, is huge in terms of student success and feeling like they've come to the right place and there is a no wrong door approach. So, yeah, I'll pause there.
I love that no wrong door approach. That's a great, I'm going to take that away. That's a really good phrase. I love that. Tim, how about you? What are you seeing with your students?
I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction. I'm going to say, in some ways, while yes, we've seen mental health become more of a thing, that basic needs like housing and food security are showing up more and more in an advisor's conversation. But I also think that the students that we recruited when we had this huge increase in international, many of them are still on our campuses. And so one of the things that's been happening is with this increase in significant world events, geopolitical things, that is coming into advising, that is coming into the core conversations, whereas in the past, maybe it hasn't. And so those are new. So in some ways, all of the old stuff is still there. All of those challenges, the acuity, the complexity is all there. This is something that feels a little bit different in the last year or two, and our campus sensitivity to those world events and topics is adjusting as well. And I would say our faculty, they're how all of these things are affecting them. The greater needs of students, the greater accommodation needs of students is coming back on advisors. So when we frame this in the idea of how does demand change for our academic advisors, the demand is not just changing from the students, the demand is changing from others that refer students to us. Our faculty, they want these things solved. They want it a little bit easier. They may not want to deal with it themselves because their class sizes are growing, all of those things. And so I think that's the other input into this that maybe we haven't seen to the same degree in the past.
Yeah, that's such a good point, right? Like the advisor can kind of sometimes become this catch-all of faculty need support supporting the students, and the advisors are really well placed to offer information. But yeah, it becomes like a double caseload almost when you're also trying to help faculty as well. Dimple, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here because I mentioned in the beginning our model is quite different, and exactly what Tim is talking about is, I think, where we're seeing the increase in complex cases being sent towards our team. So our team, I mentioned, their role is hybrid in itself. They are career and student success advisors, but we also have a hub and spoke model of advising. So our advisors are centralized. We work in a central department in advising and career services. But each of our advisors has a faculty that they are assigned to. And so their role is student-centric in multiple different spaces. We offer in-person appointments, we offer virtual appointments. They work centrally in our main office 2 days a week, and they work in a faculty space 2 days a week. And so the relationship building that's required in our hub and spoke model has always been at the center of our advising model. And we have always worked closely with faculty to receive those referrals and to be able to support faculty and make, those warm referrals in between program coordinators or instructors directly, or even associate deans sometimes from our programs. But the increased amount of case conferencing that our advisors are doing now with faculty, with program coordinators, with associate deans, and I use that word navigators and previously. That is something that I think we're seeing more and more, that our advisors are being looked at as the people to help bring others to the table. So bringing accommodations advisors to the table, bringing our care team into the room. Those relationships that our advisors are building with students extends to the relationships that they're building with other departments on campus. And so the complexity of their role in terms of navigating student cases, but also navigating sometimes a somewhat political environment in terms of student advocacy with faculty colleagues and with other departments departments. We have definitely seen an increase in that on our campus, and it is really amazing work. Like, we are so proud of our team and the way that they navigate those conversations, and of course the support that we're able to provide them. But Tim, I think you're absolutely right that the complexity of cases that faculty are seeing that they don't always have the tools to be able to respond to, those are coming to our door for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. We're seeing the same thing at SAIT as well. Yeah, Renee, go ahead.
Pardon me. I wanted to, acknowledge this complexity. I appreciate all the points that you're making. They really resonate for me. And Dimple, the idea of the wraparound support that collaboration is really prominent. It was prominent in both the U of S and Sask Polytech in the various roles I've been in. One other point that comes up that came up in some of the research I was doing with students who shared that, they are, in many cases, they're more inclined to go to an academic advisor, even when they have health or wellness issues, because of the stigma attached to seeing a counselor for mental health challenges, and the fear that if they have a diagnosis on file, that could impact their postgraduate work permit, or it could impact the profession that they want to move into. I've had students share that in the health sciences, they're very, very nervous about having any kind of diagnosis or any kind of record related to mental health or a particular learning disability on file, because whether it's real or perceived, there is a fear that it could impact them down the road. So students, therefore, come to academic advisors because it's sometimes viewed as a neutral space, but that adds a number of other layers and complexities to the skill set that academic advisors need to have to navigate those difficult conversations, to be able to assess enough that they recognize that a strategic referral needs to be made or a wraparound support needs to be created. And that's not a skill set. I know years ago when I started in academic advising, that was not a skill set that I thought I needed to have. And so it was a very steep learning curve, and an experiential learning curve that was quite interesting. And at this point, I'd say that those demands are even greater than they were when I started in advising, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. Thank you for those comments. My mind is very active right now.
Yeah, and I want to kind of dive into what you found to be helpful, right, in those situations. Because as we've all said, our learners' needs are very complex. We're being recruited to help others navigate the system, faculty, associate deans, students, everybody needs to understand how to navigate it. We're these neutral people who have this really great skill set in terms of knowing what to do next in a lot of cases, but it's becoming more complex than sometimes we have the knowledge for. So in your teams, what do you kind of look for? What do you tell your advisors to look for in terms of the flags that will help them understand when to do those handoffs and when to, maybe start having a conversation with the student about, it feels like it might be a mark on your record, but if we can get you the help, you could do so many great things. So what are those flags that you kind of help your teams look for to do those warm handoffs? And maybe I'll start with Tyler.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely really important to have that. And one of the things I try to remember just before I dive into the question, my background is in counseling. And one of the things that I always tell my advisors who don't have that background is the most important thing we can do is just be there and hold space. So when people bring in these really big problems, sometimes as an advisor, our goal is to try to make solutions, try to help them, because, oftentimes we're problem solvers, we're helpers, and that's what we want to do. But I think when those big emotions come up, I think one of the things to do is just like make sure you're comfortable just holding space, and what does that look like and how does that feel like? And so sometimes some of the, like, rather than looking for flags necessarily as a kind of starting place, it's more of just like understanding how to, without being a mental health counselor, because there definitely needs to be clear delineations and scope of practice, but, how can you make it a place where students feel safe to do that? And like Renee's point too about people not wanting to disclose, we have medical learners. One of the big things that medical students often get is something called disability insurance. It's very common because school is a lot of money, and if they can't become a physician, they'll never pay it back. And so disability insurance is a thing. And we've had multiple students get denied claims because they have an ADHD diagnosis or some mental health stuff in the background. And so I totally take that point. But I think how do we navigate this, back to the actual question, is really just having, what we do in our team is we have weekly check-ins where we can just sort of talk about anything that's sort of coming up. I think it depends on your model. I'm very lucky. We only have about 500 students, and there are 3 people that do advising. So there is really good ratios and capacity. In my old role, there was 2,000 students to each advisor. And so I know what it's like to come from that high capacity model. But I think trying to find space just to check in with folks. I think people that get into advising have sort of that sixth sense, that intuition, and the more you work, the more you have it. Sometimes, though, there are early alert systems that can be useful. So, academics, attendance, things like that can start doing that. In medicine at our school, everyone is is sort of tracked. So if you don't show up for a rotation, it gets reported to student affairs. If you're late for an exam, it gets, so we have those flags built in. But again, I realize that's a privilege being at a smaller capacity school. But I think having space and time to connect with folks when something feels a bit off, I think is a really good piece. And Tim, I really appreciate what you brought up about just food insecurity and sort of that Maslow's basic needs sort of pyramid, because that is happening more and more. So creating space, leaning on your team, and debriefing when things don't feel okay.
Yeah, great points, I think. And I'm a big proponent too, Tyler, of just like that team approach, right? Like we all learn from each other, and having those debriefing conversations, that it could be such a key point in navigating it together, right? Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, this is such a good question in terms of this idea of flagging something for a handoff. The first question you asked us, Marion, is about what's changed. And I would argue this is something that hasn't changed. And like, in some ways, it's good to know that this topic that I'm about to describe for you hasn't changed. In other ways, it's not good, meaning we have more work to do in the advising profession. So here's what I mean. For context, for those that don't know me, I spent 12 years in the college sector with academic advising reporting directly to me, and my PhD focused on student success and academic advising and those relationships. The literature and strategic reviews of advising across the universities in Canada for like the last 20 years has consistently pointed to this idea that role clarity is really important. And especially in advising, where it is often so decentralized on many campuses. And there are parts of roles or different kinds of roles that have these associations with academic advising. There is still a need, there is always a need to review and ensure that role clarity is there. And if the role is clear, the trigger for referral should also be clear. When is this in your scope? When is it not? And if there's any sense of a lack of clarity there, I would argue the advising manager and leaders really need to take this on as a thing to fix. There's also one of my favorite articles, circa 2006, from Kuhn et al., Kuhn, in the NACADA Journal. Find it, read it. I forget what it's called. It's something continuum triggers for referral. It is worth a read. It is something that I know when I was at Mohawk College, we use as the foundation for thinking about our roles. And all of those roles that are within an advising sort of scope, from front desks to academic advisors to referring to mental health counselors. So I would say this is something that we can consistently need to do, because advisors will thrive when the role is clear, and it doesn't need to be greater than what it ought to be.
I love that. I love that. Dimple, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So a little bit opposite of what Tim and Tyler shared. Not opposing what you said, Tim, but I think so I want to talk a little bit about EDI, and I want to talk about the importance of EDI training and understanding, when we talk about role clarity, traditionally back in the day, this colonial mindset of, I'm not the best person to support this demographic of student because I don't have that lived experience. Therefore, I should refer them to, this equity deserving hub on my campus. Um, and the importance of that EDI training for our advisors is I think what helps them to serve those students and ensure that they're using that trauma-informed approach, that if they're the trusted person that a student's already come to and is willing to, of course, that patience, that rapport is already there in that approach, and that relationship is built, then the EDI training needs to be there to back up the advisor's confidence in being able to support the student to the best of their ability. So that means understanding what those systemic barriers are that different populations on our campus are facing. It means checking our biases at the door, making sure that we're not assuming that every student experience is the same. Having that equity focused approach and understanding what those student needs are outside of academics. What are those basic student needs that are not being met? What are the perceptions of them in other areas? I had a note somewhere to talk about the biases around AI and academic honesty. And so I think that foundation of EDI training is so critical. And I think we need to be beyond a place of committees. And we need to be beyond a place of referring to equity hubs on our campuses. And, I have to say it is important in how we hire. It's important in the visibility and diversity in our departments. And I say that as the only racialized person on our panel today. I think it begins with your management, begins with your leadership. It begins with, your HR departments. It begins with you understanding what the limitations are for you as a practitioner. And that's okay. I think we do all have those limitations. But you may need a colleague on your team that has that lived experience to be able to help you support those students, not necessarily refer that student to that person for that support. So I think sometimes what you need, we talk about appreciative advising and the first step in that is disarming. And what you need to disarm a student could be something that you can't provide, and that's okay. But understanding what that limit is and being able to do that hard work for yourself, not expecting that your institution will do it for you, right? Or provide those learning opportunities for you. I think the conversations around EDI on our campuses have changed a lot since the murder of George Floyd. And so I think we need to be able to keep up with that. And if you feel that you haven't kept up with that personally, then, I think that's the hard work that we need to do as practitioners across student services, not just in advising.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dimple. It's such an important point that we need to keep front of mind, I think, as best as we can, for sure. Thank you so much for that. Renee, you had something to say.
I just want to respond to your comments, and I really appreciate you. I'm clapping and jumping around inside. The research that I did with focus groups of students that, experiences of equity deserving students when seeking support, you've solidified, the meaning and the significance of that research, because as advisors, I agree with you 100%. We can't be funneling students that we perceive as being equity deserving to one channel over here, because if we take a trauma-informed approach as one lens, then anytime a student or a colleague comes to us, we have to be prepared and aware of our own biases and aware of such a huge spectrum. And when I was conducting research and talking with students, I very intentionally did not focus on a particular identity or a particular demographic, because I wanted to think about what that language meant. What does it mean for us to think about equity deserving students? What exactly, as you've said, what do we need to possess? What skills, what knowledge, what awareness do we need to possess, knowing that we don't know who is going to walk through our door and what they're going to need and how are we going to respond, without always funneling to a colleague, or sending to, if I had an experience where in my role as director, an advisor had a student who self-identified as queer. Because they knew that I self-identified as queer, they wanted to connect me with that student because they weren't sure how to respond to what the student was sharing. That's just one example, one tiny little example, but I love what you're saying because it's really huge. And in some of the scholarship I was looking at, I think the scholar's name was Heffernan, and he talked about the marginalized majority, and he was flipping the narrative and saying, the majority of people on our campuses, the majority of students, colleagues, actually, if you look at it, would fall into some type of marginality. So they are the majority. So why are we still defaulting to some concept of the majority as being not part of equity deserving? Because that's a myth, that's a fallacy. So we need to have these conversations, and we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable in these complexities. So I got very excited by what you were saying. I wanted to jump in. Thank you. Love it.
This is a great segue into the next part of the conversation I wanted to have, which was the persistence piece, right? So we often, institutions will approach success measures. They'll often look to retention as a symbol of how they're doing. And we know in advising and all of the factors that you've all mentioned today, like persistence is really the path to retention. So going back to you, Dimple, how do you personally understand the distinction between retention and persistence, and why does that distinction really matter for advising and for student support?
Thank you. I feel like I should write a thesis on this at some point in my life. It's a big question. So we've been really lucky in our department. In the last several years, we have been afforded the opportunity to have a seat at some of these tables that are part of institutional conversations around retention and persistence. And I think that that's really exciting for Humber. And a quick shout out to Tim, that some of the reason that we are at some of those tables now is because of an initiative that we participated with Tim when he was still at Mohawk, and we had participated in proactive pre-arrival advising for students, which we have seen some really fantastic data on, which we still do. So quick shout out to Tim there. But so when we think about retention, it's that year-over-year success of a student. It's a student remaining at the institution in the same program with the goal of graduation. And so for us, what that looks like in our department is our advisors' portfolios, piloting what are some of the supports that we can provide for those high attrition programs, with the overall goal of increasing retention for those programs. And that's that, sort of institutional kind of lens. But persistence, as you said, is that day-to-day, it's that month-to-month approach, the trends that we're seeing as to whether students' basic needs are met in terms of their learning. So learning skills, referrals or supports, life skills, as we've talked about, some of the basic needs that students are not necessarily getting outside of their academics. The equity-based supports, I think, are part of that persistence conversation and have to be. And those are the pieces that are encouraging our students to weather the storm of difficulties and barriers that they're facing within just the semester. Getting them through midterms, getting them to exams, maintaining good academic standing, which for us is a semesterly activity. So at the end of every semester, we're doing academic progression outreach to students, and not outreach in terms of emails and things like that, but students are receiving under an understanding of their academic progression every semester. So retention is strategic, it's higher level, it's an institutional approach. There are larger, maybe departmental approaches within that. But it can take so long to track. And I think the distinction between the two matters so much for advisors because persistence is about the on-the-ground work. It's student-centric, it's based in our practice, it's based in the advisor's skill. And persistence is what tells us the real story, the honest story of the student's life cycle, right? Those ups and downs, the ins and outs, the program changes. And those are things that retention cannot tell us. And then I think all of that leads to how we define the success of our departments as well, right? So when we base it on persistence, we are looking at that short term. We're looking at how we're addressing those short-term needs, the short-term goals of those students. And it's about what the next goal post is. It's not about them, winning the game. There's a lot of FIFA talk on our campus right now. So I'm in I'm in that mindset as well. And so yeah, I think that lends itself to a lot of opportunity for development of flexible policies. It is more conversation around advocacy. It's about helping students build self-advocacy skills, the problem-solving skills, positive help-seeking behavior. I think persistence is tied into a lot of that day-to-day work and that skill building, and especially with strong appreciative developmental advising approaches, you can really see the impact of that within that. And again, with EDI top of mind, we know that persistence impacts historically marginalized students very differently than it does others. And so persistence allows us to tell that story more clearly as well. In how our marginalized students, how our equity deserving students are persisting differently than others. So I'll pause there.
Go ahead, Tim.
I think Dimple did a great job of describing why the concept of persistence matters. I think I want to add on to it in a nuanced way. When I think about persistence or retention, it really is about success. And success in the textbook definition of it, dictionary definition, is about the achievement of a goal. So then really the question is whose goals are we achieving? If an institution is achieving its goals, it's keeping or retaining a student. If a student is achieving its goals, then it really is about persistence. They are continuing theoretically. They're meeting whatever next milestone they're trying to meet. When we frame our work around student goals or persistence, I think what we do is it helps us understand our purpose. What is the purpose of this advising intervention or program or service? Is it about answering your one big question today? Is it about making you feel confident or comfortable seeking support again in the future? Is it about feeling like you have a place where you belong? Those ought to be the things that we are evaluating in academic advising programs. We ought not be evaluating retention, because if anybody's looked at any retention model out there, there's a bazillion variables. You can't control for all of those things. It's not going to work. And it's kind of a fool's errand. I've gone down that path a million times and done it wrong. And if you have an academic or a senior administrator telling you you need to evaluate your programs for retention, I would say, look at the research. It's not going to be that helpful. Look at the things you can control and evaluate those things. And once you've done that, you might see down the line some trickle effects that show some higher retention rates. That's great. But control that narrative for that part of it, achieve those goals, support students, and you will be much more effective at your work and not getting distracted by this shiny thing called retention that is too difficult to reach out and grab.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll just jump in here and say, we're having a big conversation at SAIT right now. It's a cohort-based model. So you sign up for a program and they've given you a clear-cut directional program that takes 2 years. Majority of our students need to take care of their family or they need to work to make money to survive, right? And they don't complete in those 2 years. And so we're having a lot of conversations right now about how do we measure what's the success criteria? Just to your point, Tim, like it's kind of outdated the way we look at the data, right? So it's almost a case of how do we redefine what success looks like and look for those measures? Because a typical diploma student isn't going to finish in 2 years. We call them off track, but they're just trying to live their life while they go to school. So it's evolving for sure.
The only evidence I would say that's out there is if you're doing interventions that are broad-based, you might see improvements in retention for some of the most at-risk students populations in very niche small populations, but you have to look for them. That means you have to have good equity data. U of T has this wonderful equity census, but it's anonymized and not necessarily connected to student profiles. So it's hard to evaluate that. But if you have a way to evaluate it, you might find that your work is supporting retention of those who might be struggling the most. But if you don't have that background, it's really hard to do. So to look at it broad-based of increasing retention of a whole cohort, it's really hard to do and hard to find the data support.
Okay, so hearing about the conversations that advisors are having, the complex needs of our students, the fact that these conversations are happening in an advising office and we're kind of on the ground doing that persistence work every day. I'll put this question to Tim. How can institutions better draw on advising knowledge and practice to support sustainable, meaningful approaches to persistence?
All right, I've already talked too much because I jump in a little bit. So I'll answer it briefly and then turn it over to the rest of this wonderful panel. I think we have to look at data and evidence. And I would say we still have a long way to go on that front. So let me cite another article, which I think is a beautiful example of why we need to look at this. There's an article called Coaching to Completion. I think Valentine is the author. It's recent, it's 2023. I saw somebody find the article I cited earlier. If you can find it and pop it into the chat, that would be great. This article, what it was this massive study across community colleges, I think in North Carolina, and they evaluated this coaching to completion model. They found that it worked for students. It was a great intervention for academic advising, wonderful. But what I found was interesting was that the institutions that demonstrated implementation fidelity, meaning put the intervention in place as designed with lots of senior support. Each institution was actually evaluated by the researchers on how well did they implement the intervention. The institutions that did it the best in terms of higher implementation fidelity had higher rates of retention and helped those that needed it most better. And so if we're going to do the work and if we're going to think about better drawing on advising knowledge and practice, then we need to draw on evidence and do so properly. Put things in as they're intended to be done. I think about proactive advising and some of the work that I've done in the past, some of the work that Dimple has extended at Humber. Follow the model, do it well, adjust it to your population, but follow it and evaluate it, and you will see greater outcomes. But if you're going to say, I don't need to do that, we only need to do this, only need to do that, I would argue you're missing the point, and you might not be able to create sustainable solutions.
Thanks. Yeah. Having those frameworks is so helpful. And I see someone's found that article as well that you mentioned too. So it's in the chat if anyone wants to read it afterwards. Any other thoughts from the panel about how we can leverage that advising knowledge to help with persistence?
Yeah, I can jump in. So yeah, really great points, Tim. And I think too, when we're looking at it, there's like the institution, there's the division, there's the advising office. And so I think the level that you're able to influence, I think really says a lot about this. And, coming from the arts and social science office, we were very removed from the larger conversation. And so it's challenging when you're in those spaces because you have all of these ideas and you want to make change, but you don't really have a seat at the table to do so. Now in medicine, luckily, we report directly to the dean. And so there is that opportunity. And so I think it's looking at, what is your availability to actually influence change. And one of the things that it's a quote that stays with me, that it's nothing about us without us, I think is a really important thing. And so your population, like Tim said, how they perceive your interventions, how involved they are, I think is really, really important. There's no blanket thing that says, oh, this will work for everyone across Canada. Just do this and you'll all be great. You really need to figure out what you're trying to get out of it at the end of the day, and really thinking of, approaches to persistence. At the end of the day, it is about supporting the learners to do what they do best. And so where are those challenges coming through? Where are the areas of friction? And using your level of influence, what can you do to help make that better? And so I think in advising, we're so privileged because we're hearing these stories every single day when we're working with these learners. And so what are those stories telling you? And how can you then take those narratives and go to the research, go to the different formulas, the templates, the advising models, and find one that fits for your population? And then how do you advocate for that to be implemented in a meaningful way? And then to Tim's point as well, how do you evaluate it? I think too, when offices are overburdened and have really high levels of capacity, that evaluation piece gets missed because there's just simply not time to do it. You come up with this new program and you do it and you sort of hope for the best. And so it is really looking at, are there ways to check back in on that work, to reevaluate it, and to get buy-in from the powers that be to make things a little bit better. But yeah, just I think this is a great question going off of what Dimple and Tim said about the importance of persistence versus retention. Retention is such a cold, unfeeling concept, and we're all in the business of working with people's stories. And so I think really focusing on that is a good place to start.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Go ahead, Dimple.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention this concept of scalability too. I think we tend to think about initiatives that we can do for everybody, right? What's something that we can put in place that will impact all students in all faculties, in all programs at all levels, right? Like that is not possible. It's not possible. It's not sustainable. It's not feasible. And so, I joke with our associate dean all the time, like we don't like pilots. This is not a pilot, right? We're testing a theory with a small group of students. We're very lucky because we are a relatively small institution, in comparison to some of the large universities. We're a very large polytechnic, but we have a really amazing relationship with our institutional research department. So it is possible for us to say, we saw that there was this policy change. Have we tracked the impact of that? So, for example, right now we're making changes to our academic regulations and academic progression rules for students who are required to withdraw. And so we were able to ask for, what's the data around that? Have we done any tracking? And that's part of the relationship building that we've been able to do. But then to be able to create small, scalable initiatives that we know we have the capacity, the interest, and the ability to impact. And so I think sometimes it starts from there. Every single department in student services collects so much data. We love surveys. We love surveys in student services and student affairs. I know our department, we super love surveys. We have too many, but we have so much data at our fingertips. I think it's about thinking about what data you have and how can you use that data, or systems, right? It doesn't have to be new, shiny early alert systems or CRMs or things like we have tools available at our institutions, especially right now at a time where we're being asked to scale everything back. What do you have available that you can, tweak within reason, to Tim's point, and be able to find small scalable opportunities to impact change? I think sometimes it feels, when we talk about persistence and retention initiatives at an institution, it feels like it's something that has to be at a much higher level, right? To Tyler's point, like, the powers that be, how can we encourage or entice the powers that be to allow us to do some of this, but some of it starts small. And this is something that we try to talk about with our advisors is, yes, we have an idea, but really we have to rely on their expertise. They know the students well to be able to, and they know their faculty partners well to be able to know, are there small scalable initiatives that we can put in place, and how can we work with our institutional research department to say, hey, we want to do this thing, will you help us to track that? So anyway, point being, I don't think it always needs to be big, large initiatives. I think you can start small and think about scaling up, but you also you can't fix all the problems. You can't be everything to everybody. And so it's okay to start small and then move up from there.
Yeah, I think that's such an important perspective to be taking too, especially when we have all of the different things shifting and moving and having complex student conversations and yeah, just the amount of data available to us is sometimes overwhelming. So I love that idea of just focus in on a little piece and see how it's doing, and maybe we find that it's a great thing to chase down and grow, and maybe it's just a little experiment we've done and we get our findings and move on to something else. So that's a great perspective. Thank you. Okay, so I can probably hear in the background, we're having these great conversations about all of this great work advising is doing, but I think the piece that we're really interested in today is just how do we maintain sustainability in the work, right? How do we take all of this, navigate all of these different challenges and still have people at the end of the day who are not burnt out and are able to have their own healthy lives outside of work. So just to Renee, I'm going to ask this question. In roles like academic advising that require both technical knowledge and emotional presence, all of these factors can take a toll sometimes. So what decisions are you making about what advisors can and can't reasonably hold? And then what has helped you to continue to show up in the work?
I think I'm going to speak to some of the experiences I had at the U of S, and that subsequently informed some of the research that I undertook. And I think that I identified three layers or three pathways that seem to stand out, and most of them are rooted in some idea of process. I've been doing a lot of process work in terms of thinking what is the workflow, what is the process that we are engaging in or designing. But it starts with the layer of supporting advisors so they have some knowledge about how to navigate difficult conversations, unfamiliar conversations. And that speaks to some of the competencies that several people have mentioned here. But then in terms of the process, I was imagining, a multi-layered support system. And the model that comes closest to mind is like a stepped care model where we look at what do our students need. There's a layer of informational support that's required so that students have access to information 24/7, 365. And that can be how the institutions use their websites. It can be, particular targeted sites where we maintain content, and that's going to help the student without necessarily overextending our team of advisors. So that's layer one of a multi-layered approach. And then we have the prescriptive and transactional pieces that can be in person or online, can also be informational. And then we save, that top layer or the bottom layer or the layer or the outer layer, however we want to position that horizontally or vertically. The students who require the deeper, more holistic work, then we are recognizing that there's going to be a team of advisors, maybe a set period of time, including some on-demand advising, so that we have the time and the space to do that deep dive. So for me, it was, preparing advisors so that they're ready to take on different types of advising supports, but having processes in place so students can get access to the information they need, or if it's a deeper dive that they require, that we have the resources and the time and space to allow for that. Because we've looked at these processes and we've mapped out, we're able to anticipate up to a point what students are going to need at different stages, but we reserve this space for the deeper dive. And it starts to address some of the capacity issues because we're literally funneling down, okay, what do we need for this type of work? What type of competencies? What is the volume that we might anticipate at particular times of year? So I was getting into a lot of that type of process work at the U of S just to ultimately distribute the workload. That's what it comes back to, right? Distributing the workload across our people and creating those supports for people resources and for student support. So I hope hope there was some clarity in that because in my mind it's very complicated, but it's that process piece that I started to map out because we needed to distribute and we needed to make room for different types of supports so we could be timely and sensitive to student needs in a very complex and high volume scenario. I'm going to stop there so I don't dig a bigger rabbit hole that I may have already created, but that's my response to what I was seeing and how we were starting to manage some of those challenges.
Yeah, I love that idea of like creating those layers of, here's the basics. You really don't need to speak to anybody. You can just read it here and hopefully get started on your own and then come in when we have those deeper needs and those bigger conversations, right? Yeah. How are other people navigating this push and pull of, giving the advisors what they need to be able to support our students in a sustainable way?
I can jump in and start us off. So I think language is really important, and I loved the question, just kind of naming the difference between retention and persistence. And one of the things that I try to focus on with my staff is the difference between support and responsibility. And so we get very attached to our learners. We walk through them on incredible journeys, and I think making sure that we sort of are there for support, but the responsibility isn't necessarily on us at the end of the day. And so making sure we're doing everything we can, we're holding space, we're helping think through options, we're co-creating plans, we're referring them when necessary. But there are systemic barriers, there are things that have limitations. And so I think making sure that our staff sort of have that in their mind and aren't taking on more than they need to. And then I think open communication between advisors is really important to check in regularly on how we're all doing. We carry a lot of work, and especially now, there are so many influencing factors. So making sure that, your staff is communicating when they feel things are getting too heavy to carry, or when things, there's no set rule like this is right, this is wrong, this is you, this is not. But I think again, back to sort of that advisor's intuition, the more you work with humans and people, the more you really understand when those boundaries become clear. And I think the big thing is when thinking about like what keeps us from showing up each day, I think it's really going back to your why. When I'm advising med students, medicine is a wild journey. And when they're thinking about what kind of physician they want to be, I always tell them well, what is your why? Like, why are you here as a physician? But I think we can turn that question back onto ourselves. What do we get out of this role? And I think it's such an interesting career choice in student services because I don't think any of us grow up dreaming of being a student support professional. It's not really, next to firefighter or princess or whatever it may be. I think it's a bit of an obscure career as, a main career choice. But I think we all come to it because we care deeply about what we do. And I think reconnecting into that why when things start to get tough is a really important thing. And we need to work as a team, whether that's in our own offices, but also like nationally, internationally. I love when we have these opportunities to come together and talk about this stuff because, I think Dimple and Tim had a previous relationship, but I've just met all of these people very recently, and already we share so many foundations of why we do this work. And so leaning on your colleagues, creating those networks, and I love that there's a networking event as part of this to help build that. So lean on your team members. And then I think the last one is just, what is in your control and what can you do right now, I think is a big piece. I think Dimple's comment about, where there feels gaps, whether it's with EDIA or certain populations, like there is work that needs to be done on yours, and the university is not going to do it for you. And so if this is something that you need to engage in more, it's something to find space. So maybe it's talking to your director and say, you know what, I'm having a hard time, wrapping my head around these concepts. I think I need more training or I need more support. So advocating for yourself and just being kind to ourselves, being kind to each other. I know that's a cheesy thing to say, but I think it is a really key cornerstone in the work we do. And showing up isn't just a commitment, but designing the work in a way that makes it possible to keep showing up is what's really important. And so as a team, come up together to say, how are we able to show up continually and find those solutions as a group?
Yes, yes. I was saying too before we started today, Jennifer mentioned that there's 250 people registered for the summit this week, which is almost double, I think more than double of last year. And my inkling is that it might be because we're all kind of searching for that community so that we can share how we're doing and really, just like you said, Tyler, connect with each other and talk about what's working well and what we can do to help each other out. Absolutely. Dimple, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so not Zoom savvy, so I think I need to lower my hand here. Sorry about that. I wanted to agree with Renee in terms of something you mentioned that we try to do in our drop-in practice. So we have drop-in advising every day as well as booked appointments that we offer. And as I mentioned, the complexity of in-person and virtual and multiple locations that students can find their advisors. But looking at those peak periods, so for us, it's the academic calendar, right? Dates of refund, dates of withdrawal, dates of academic penalty. We know that those are times where developmental conversations and those dig deep conversations are just not as feasible because you need to trust the advisors to make those decisions of when we can have the transactional conversations of here's the information. And please, I sense that there is something else, right? I sense that there is something more. I sense there is another barrier. Our drop-in appointment times are quite short. And so, please come back and build that relationship with them and still using all of the same skill set that you would. But really trusting, I think, advisors to know that now is not the time to have those dig deep conversations. And we'd like to get I'd like to get back to you. I'd like for you to book a follow-up appointment and do that in the moment. Make that part of that transactional, like here's the information you need, but also here's how you book a follow-up appointment and let's dig deeper. And so the decisions that we're making about what advisors can and can't hold has to be made with them, right? They're on the ground. They're the ones that are front facing. They're the ones that know what those ebbs and flows are more intimately in terms of that student life cycle. But in terms of how we help our team show up, I think that's entirely about relationship building. That is entirely about workplace culture. That's entirely about how you show up as a supervisor or as a leader, how you show gratitude. And this can also be between colleagues, right? It doesn't just have to be a manager to advisor relationship. But I think Tyler said this already around creating time and space for discussion, for people to feel heard, for building connection. And it's not just about what's happening in our sector right now. It's about what's happening in the world. We've talked about the political turmoil, the war, the genocide, everything else that's happening. That intimately impacts how people show up as themselves. And so we think about advisor burnout, especially in those peak times, and with everything happening in the world, it is about creating that safe space and those relationships within a department that an advisor feels comfortable saying, I don't think I can do this today. Like, I don't think I can be the drop-in advisor today. Can we figure this out? Can we make some adjustments to the schedule? Is there somebody else on the team that can jump in? Those are really tough conversations for folks to have, especially right now, especially where people are feeling the pressure of job security. So I think that that's really important. Then we talk about how advisors show up, that relationship that we are building with them within a department and that culture. I think that that's critical. I wanted to mention, so we had a really impactful training from our Office of EDIB yesterday around creating a sense of creating a culture of belonging on campus. And one of the pieces of research that was shared was a law professor and researcher from NYU, Kenji Yoshino. And he talks about masking or covering. 60% of people are covering some part of their identity and conforming to workplace norms to be able to show up and do the work. And so when you think about relationship building and we think about creating a sense of belonging, how are we contributing to our own advisors, to our own team, our own colleagues, being able to find those safe spaces where they don't feel they have to cover and mask in our workplaces, right? And again, we can't change the entire institution, but can we at least create that safe space within our own workspace, within our own offices, so that from a management perspective, that I can understand and support that colleagues are doing the training and doing the work so that they can support each other, and that the burden of advocacy on those advisors is decreased because they know there are others on the team that can support and advocate learners from equity deserving groups the same way. Because I think when we talk about burnout, we should be talking about the impact of burnout on equity deserving staff, right? And that is higher for those advisors and for those staff. So I wanted to mention that. I think that relationship building, that understanding, and that trust that's built within a team environment is critical in how we make decisions about supporting our teams.
Thank you so much, Dimple. Yeah, I think I love that idea of the burden of advocacy, right? And then thinking about who's carrying that burden, and are we giving them the space to have the real conversations and help us understand their needs and support that they need. Yeah, that's great. Tim, did you have any thoughts on this one?
I think my colleagues here on the panel are brilliant, and I agree with them all. At the end of the day, this is about, at the individual level, how do you show up? And at the leadership level, how do you lead? Are you creating safe spaces? Are you leading in a way that is creating psychological safety, that creates a good culture? If you can do those things well, everything else gets that much easier. Because then when you're trying to deal with the more difficult topics, you have a little bit of credit to do so, right? Like you can take a few more risks and do those things. But if you're not practicing really good, sound leadership, it's not going to work. People aren't going to show up for you. So you got to show up and be a really good leader. And as an advisor, you're going to show up and be the best version of yourself. And hopefully there's a good relationship between you and your supervisor. Everything starts with relationships. So Dimple's right.
Dimple's right. Yes, I would agree. Great. Well, my final question, we're almost at time already, and I can see there's lots of questions in the chat too, so I want to make sure we have time for those. My final question, and we can popcorn this, whoever would like to go first, but knowing that challenges will always be on the horizon, if there's one message that you want advisors in the room to hear right now, what would it be?
All right, I'll start. Advising has been and continues to be the centerpiece of many, many student success institutional strategies. The emphasis of that might be changing, rightfully so, to be more trauma informed, to be more thinking about psychological safety, to be thinking about how are we supporting and leading with equity in mind. I think all of that is there. That emphasis that advising is a key part of any institutional strategy is still there. How we leverage that, how we support one another, that's our choice. The massive number of people here today demonstrates that we're all looking to do that. And so I would say the way we continue to support one another as a community and caucus through the community of practice is a big deal. And so I would say keep leaning into this group and find ways to support one another across the profession.
Thank you so much, Tim. Go ahead, Renee.
I made a note of something, and it's repetitive in that it speaks to a lot of the comments that were already made. But for me, one of the most important things I did when I was in the throes of student advising and student support systems was to create an internal network of colleagues. And that was, in that case, it was a network of advising colleagues across the various colleges within the institution so that we could share knowledge and we could clarify. And we always knew there was a team of people within our own unit, but across campus who were dealing with a lot of the same challenges, but from slightly different vantage points, depending on the discipline. And for me, that was huge. So I can't stress that enough to make sure, try to cultivate that small network of colleagues who are going to get what you're experiencing. So you feel that you can take care of yourself, and that self-care extends out to care for the people in your community and the work we do with students. So a little bit repetitive, but I just wanted to bring that point home. That has been really important for me in this field, in this sector.
Yeah, it goes back to those relationships, right? Relationships with our networks as well. Tyler, do you want to tell us what your message for the room is?
Sure. I think it kind of goes back to the what is your why? And so really thinking about what we don't love every aspect of our jobs. There's things in every role that, bring a little bit of friction, but thinking about your day-to-day role, like what are those pieces that really fill up your bucket? And are there opportunities to do more of that if you're feeling like you're kind of sinking below? And so is it that you love programming? Is it that you like presentations or group work? Is it the one-on-one counseling? Is it the opportunity to use Excel? Like there are different things that people gravitate towards. And I think, to Tim's point, like hopefully you do have a supervisor who's open to those conversations, and for the supervisors in the room, be open to those conversations. I think the work we do is important and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of amazing opportunities in this work, but there are a lot of challenges. And so when things get a little tough, what are those things that fill your bucket? And are there ways to do more of that when things feel heavier? I think that would be mine.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. And Dimple, you get the last word.
Thank you. So much of what all of my colleagues have already said. I think advisors need to know that you are essential to student success on your campuses. You are navigators. You're not just advising for academic skills, you're advising for employability skills, you're advising for life skills. And that is an integral part of the student cycle and students' experience on campus. And so, I think if you haven't heard it, I'm sure you have, but you are all doing amazing work. And I think that that's so critical for you to hear. I think I agree with Tyler so much around knowing your why. And I think there are ways to build that in that are formal, and there are ways to build that in that are informal. So finding those passion projects, finding those small committees and working groups, and getting the approval from your supervisors to do things in work that fill your bucket, as well as, of course, doing the things outside of work that fill your bucket. I think, if you are an institution or a department that loves surveys as much as we do, going through student feedback, read those testimonials, remind yourself of the amazing things students are saying about the work that you're doing, because I think those are things that we forget to do. We forget to pull up those surveys and those reports, and we forget to read those testimonials. And do that reflection with your supervisors. Talk about the wins you've had in a week with faculty, with a particularly difficult colleague on campus. I think those are all, there's power in that data. That is part of the data, that qualitative data. And then, of course, there's the other data. We talked about how you can make small action toward persistence and retention. Really persistence, though, in your roles and in your spaces, and find ways that you can find wins in an area that you're passionate about, and elevate the work that you're doing at your institution with the support of your leadership. I couldn't just pick one. Sorry, Marion.
It's okay. That was a great summary. That was a great summary. Thank you so much. Yeah. And just to kind of jump off that too, I will say one of the conversations I know I've been having with faculty and leaders at my institution are feedback doesn't have to be negative, right? Positive feedback sometimes can be the thing that helps you just stay motivated and keep going. And so pointing to all of those things that are going well, while also looking for ways to improve, I think is really important to keep in mind. So yeah, that's my little takeaway for everyone. So thank you so much to the panel. Just to
Can
wrap
I
up.
just jump in quickly, Marion? It's
Yeah,
Jennifer. I just wanted to
absolutely.
say something, and I know it's been a long time since I oversaw an advising office, but I would say two things. One is at the beginning of the call, Tyler was celebrating the successes of his students, which was just the best thing ever. And I think that's what you were referring to when you talk about the wins. And so, where you have that opportunity to get excited about the student who gets the scholarship or who passes a course that they were struggling with or gets into the program that they were waiting for, those are the moments where, from when I worked on a campus, and I'm not working on a campus now, but that I remember. And the other thing I would say, if there's one piece of advice, if you don't already do this, and not all institutions do this way, but if you have the opportunity to volunteer at convocation and see students walk across the stage, like it's hard to get out of the office for the day. And when I was at OCAD, it was a big production, and sometimes I was in the back making sure people had their gowns on the right way or whatever it is. It is actually the best day of the year. So those are two little things for what it's worth. Thank you so much to all of the panelists too.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I feel like the convocation is almost like the win of all of the persistent stuff we've been doing along the way, right? Those students, you're like, I'm coming to the stage and I'm going to shake your hand before you get up there because I know what you've gone through. So that's such a great reminder. Awesome. Okay, well, let's open the floor up then for questions. Banjo, I guess you're going to be helping us out with that, hey?
You can go ahead with that as well. Thank you,
Okay.
Marion. I just want to say thank you to the panelists and thank you, Marion. That was an incredible and insightful conversation, and I took a lot of notes. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm scrolling through the chat. I'm looking for the questions. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. Here's one. So to the whole panel, how have student needs or levels of complexity changed? Oh, sorry, that was my question to the whole panel. Sorry.
Marion, there was a question during the that was asked by Vivian. So the question is, what institutional levers, advising, faculty practices, or cross-office collaboration are most underused when it comes to improving retention equitably? I'll copy it and put it lately in the chat, but that was the question.
I can take a stab at it first. I think the things that are underused are the things that you mentioned. And so I think people are not doing as much cross-office collaboration or looking at faculty practices. And so I think one of the things that really changed advising at Dalhousie University is we started doing an advising symposium. So advising is very, very siloed. At Dal, there previous to this initiative, there was not a lot of cross-office collaboration, and I think that was a really, really big step forward in the right way. And so our previous director of student success sort of brought that initiative on, and it's continued to practice, and it brings different types of advisors together as well. And so it's not just your typical student success coaches, but also faculty advisors, honors advisors, medicine goes as well. And so you have all of these different perspectives coming together for a shared cause. And I think similar to hopefully the inspiration that you all are getting, I'm feeling inspired as well just by what everyone says. I think the opportunity to share about things that you love and care about really just fuels that flame. And so, at least at our university, the cross office collaboration wasn't happening at all. And so that was just underused as a principle. But by just bringing everyone together, we created just like an advising list serve where when people were doing cool initiatives, they just share it and it would go out to everyone. So that's a very simple, low cost, low resource solution. But the yearly symposium where we just get together, have guest speakers, talk about what's going on, little breakout rooms, it really does make a big difference and it grows that network. So that's worked well for us here.
Thanks, Tyler. Go ahead, Tim.
I love the question about institutional levers. There are things that cost money and there are things that don't cost money. I start there. In the things that don't cost money, it's about what are the mandates that a president or a vice president gives to leadership related to advising and supporting students in relation to equitable student success. That's an easy place to start, to tell people to figure out, to prioritize this or that. I think that's one piece that is underutilized, that leaders can put those things in place and give lots of people those sort of trickle down sort of goals. The second part is what do you choose to fund? What do you choose to do related to hiring, related to professional development? Like these things don't have to cost a lot of money. It can just be more focused and targeted related to strategy and strategic mandates. The other thing I'll say is we have lots of access to data. If we're really going to make a difference, do we know who is actually struggling? Do we know who is not persisting at the same rates as other students or as the whole population? If you know those things and you're like, you know what, there's a group of 200 people in this cohort or with these characteristics that when you know that, then you can start designing interventions. And any kind of proactive advising intervention is going to help at least make them feel like they're seen when maybe they weren't seen. And I think we need to do those things. So those would be the things I would focus on.
Inter-office relationships, coordinating with other advisors across campus, and then using the data and what's already in existence. Thank you for those thoughts. Okay, another question we have, what outreach methods have you made use of successfully or otherwise beyond traditional emails? It's a great question. Dimple, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Tyler. Thank you. Unmuted at the same time. In developing a relationship with our registrar's office, we were doing outreach on our own. We were requesting our own sets of data to do outreach for, low midterm grades and academic standing and things like that. And we did do the hard work of asking, well, we didn't do the hard work. Our institutional research department did the hard work of assessing whether there was impact of that or not, and there wasn't. And so we built the relationship with our communications colleagues in the registrar's office, who are the ones who send out that communication initially. And we took lessons from the research that was done at Mohawk around psychologically attuned communications, and we looked at what we were offering. And so two things. One was that we embedded our departmental information in institutional messaging that was already going out. Because an email coming from the registrar's office that has an official, title, as opposed to coming from advising and career services, we know that students aren't reading every single email they get, and students are inundated with communication. So I think that has helped, is that we've embedded our services as part of institutional messaging. We also have increased our practices around group advising. So we now offer more group advising sessions at critical times. Right after academic standing letters go out, we're offering group advising. Just before critical dates in our academic calendar, we're offering group advising. And again, the messaging is coming from a centralized place. And so I think that that has helped. We also use our social media a lot. We have a really great student team that is bogged down in social media requests from our team of can we put this up and can we put that up? But, meeting students where they're at, I think that has helped as well. So using a couple different methods. What's interesting, and I would be curious, even just in the chat, if folks are in the room, I'd be curious to hear whether others are still doing paper posters on campus, because I have had learners tell me that they would rather stop and read a poster on campus than read another email. And, I have a background in residence life. I remember the days of printing posters and sticking them up around a residence building, but we don't really think about that as much anymore. And of course, the conversations and relationships with our sustainability office are always top of mind. But should we be going back to the traditional paper posters on campus? And I think about that sometimes too.
That's so interesting. I love it's almost like we're all tired of being online, right? So let's go back to the analog ways of communicating. But yeah, meeting students where they're at, that's so important. Tyler, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say quickly, I'll second the posters. We use them. Our students are also all in the same classroom every single day, so it's a lot easier for that way. So that's an easy one. But one of the things that we did was we really invested in a social communications person that does our social media, specifically our Instagram, and they're also a Gen Z, and so they get things that I do not. And so they really do use more of the kind of meme style reels, and they're very effective because that's the audience that we're working with, and we have found definitely increased participation in some of our events and just really great community building online. So it's one thing that I was a little surprised on because I am not a social media savvy person, but when they came in, they really revolutionized how we do that part of our role, and it has had a really big impact that's measurable. The other cool thing about Instagram, if you're a data person, is there is lots of data. So you can see when people are looking at your posts, like what time of day, and then you can coordinate things based on that. And so it's been a really, like, I've learned a ton from it, but definitely all the kudos go to our amazing communications manager. So yeah, it's been really effective and yeah, exciting.
Great. Okay, I think there's one more here. So I think this might have to be our last question just because I know we're wrapping up pretty quickly here. What are some early indicators you find most valuable for identifying students who might need additional support?
I already jumped in and started typing in the chat too. I'm multitasking here. So I'll say what I said in the chat. If you have any data that there are a group of students that have not engaged in some program or service very early on, those are the students that are at risk. So I can tell you in my dissertation, I had 70% of students respond to a survey at Mohawk College. And everything I did to try to evaluate academic advising and all sorts of things like career clarity, academic self-efficacy didn't matter compared to how much it mattered that the 30% didn't respond. The greatest predictor of future success was early engagement at Mohawk College during the time that I looked at that data. And that was a survey that students completed in August before attending campus. So if you have some data that points to that, reach out to those people. Certainly, they probably have life stuff going on. They might have jobs, they might have other things going on, but those are the people you need to worry about. I just saw similar data at UTM just in the last week. And it's one of the first times I've seen it here on this campus where students that did not engage in our summer orientation program were the ones that were most at risk or more likely to leave early. So if you've got data like that, if it's in the classroom, if it's a faculty member that is worried because a student hasn't shown up in the first week, like that is actionable intelligence that has lots of evidence behind it. You don't have to do another study to figure it out. Use that data and do something meaningful with it.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'll jump in with two quick things. One is similar to what Tim was saying around data, around engagement, is students who have or haven't logged into their LMS. So we use Blackboard, whatever else you use, along the same vein of what Tim is saying. If they haven't logged into their learning management system in the first 2 weeks, that's an indicator. And so that's something that, is a very um, easy data pull, hopefully, at your institution, and that's something that you can use. The other is low entrance GPAs. So it really depends again on your institutional context. But for us, we know one of the initiatives that we run is pre-arrival advising, and we've had some impact on students with low entrance GPAs. And so we know that that is an early indicator, and that is something that is even before they step foot on campus.
Yeah, we do something similar at SAIT with the attendance piece. So we have an early alert system that auto generates an email to the advising team if someone's concerned. And we've said, if you haven't seen or heard from a student in the first even 3 days of class, and they're not accessing, let us know. And we've learned from a lot of those interactions. Sometimes it's because the student actually wasn't ever intending to come. And they just don't know that they have to withdraw from the program, and there's some extra steps there to take. So yeah, those early flags can be very, very helpful. And then too, the ones that aren't going, you can have those conversations about, what success, what's standing in their way, and what we can do to maybe support them. Early intervention. Okay, we have about 7 minutes left. So I lied. We do have more time for one more question. What aspects of academic advising should leaders be prioritizing when evaluating evidence for retention-focused investments, and why?
I'll take a swing at it and see how it goes, and I'll try not to ramble too much. So what aspects of academic advising? So I guess that sort of is a broader question back, like, what do you consider the aspects of advising? Is it like staffing? Is it space? But I think what you need to prioritize is what your campus needs. And so I think figuring out where the story is, where the data is leading you, I think that's sort of a great place to start. Every campus, every population, every faculty is going to be very different. At Dalhousie, I think I've worked in my 20 years in like 9 different faculties, and everyone was a little bit different, not only in its structure, but even in the needs of its learners. And so I think looking at what sort of challenges are your learners facing, I think is a good place to start, and then seeing, where that leads to. So is it a space issue? Is there no safe space on campus for them to come to access the supports? Is it that there's not enough staff? Is it that, there's a demand for group advising, but that's not being offered? So I think it's really, start looking at the evidence to tell the story rather than focusing on the interventions and then evaluating them after, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and I love that point in the chat, Tim. Don't create a solution in search of a problem. It's a great yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to our panel today. Just to wrap it up, I just wanted to kind of summarize. We've heard so much about the importance of data from Tim, right? And using the evidence that we already have, leaning into those relationships, both with the students, with your faculty, with your colleagues, for support, taking care of yourself, and just keeping in mind your why. The work that advisors do on campuses across Canada is so important, and it's a keystone to persistence and student success. So keep doing the great work that you're all doing, and thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Marion, for facilitating that wonderful conversation. Renee, Dimple, Tyler, Tim, thank you so much once again on behalf of CACOS and the Advising Community of Practice. And thank you, everyone, for joining this panel. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll return in a new Zoom room for our networking session. You should all have the link already. I strongly encourage everyone to join the session as well, because we'll revisit some of the topics that were covered here today and even more so as well. So please grab a coffee, stretch your legs, and we'll see you over in the networking Zoom room at 12 p.m. my time. I guess that will be 2 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, everyone.